to Lebanon. The congressional election's just 2 weeks away now, and there's politics in the air. On Sunday, House Speaker Thomas O'Neill sent a letter to his Democratic colleagues saying President Reagan's economic program was based on, quote, pie-in-the-sky optimism. Reaganomics was also criticized by a prominent liberal economist. Lester Thurow of MIT on Sunday warned of permanent economic stagnation.
The idea that spontaneous combustion is going to occur, somehow the private economy is just going to take off by itself, that's precisely what got Herbert Hoover in trouble 50 years ago. We sat around waiting for something positive to happen. That something positive never happened, and we ended up with financial crises making sinking economies worse, and we ended up in that predicament that we now know as the Great Depression.
The Great Depression left its mark on President Reagan. At least that's what the president told U.S. News and World Report. In an interview published on Sunday, Mr. Reagan says living through the Depression gave him a special feeling for America's jobless. Quote, "It isn't ice water, it's real blood that I bleed for the unemployed," said the president. Federal agents involved in the massive drug crackdown around Miami say suspects free on bond may leave the country. The investigators are complaining that judges are setting very low bond, making it easier for suspects to flee. Earlier, we spoke with Associate Attorney General Rudolph Giuliani about the progress of Operation Swordfish, as it's called.
You cut into the problem. You can't stop completely the flow of drugs into this country, but by dealing with source countries, trying to get them to eradicate the crop, by offering them incentives to do so, which we do, by beefing up your border patrol, and then by working on these organized criminal enterprises that deal in drugs in the interior, you can cut the problem back pretty substantially.
We'll have more of our conversation with the Associate Attorney General, Rudolph Giuliani, later on Night Watch. In Los Angeles, urban planners are talking about getting rid of the smog for good. Fat chance. Linda Douglas tells us whether those plans will be realized or just go up in smoke.
On smoggy days, the only way you can see Los Angeles is to use your imagination.
I feel terrible on a smoggy day.
My eyes bother me, my nose itches.
Tightness in my chest, a little shortness of breath.
Kind of low-key, quiet.
For years, local officials have struggled to meet mandatory federal clean air standards. Now they have approved a plan which could make Los Angeles go from this sometimes to this all the time by the year 2000. It calls for tighter controls on industrial polluters and car emissions, but the final success of the plan hinges on a radical assumption that people here are willing to give up life as they know it now. Life in Southern California means an average commute of 1 hour. To clean up the air, says the plan, homes and offices must be closer together, something that has already begun through land use planning.
It's not that hard to convert Los Angeles from a network of interlocking freeways to a network of citylets where the people live and work in the same sort of areas.
Much of the plan is a wish list. That gasoline will be phased out and replaced by electricity and methanol, that commuters will start biking and walking, and that the computer age will take people off the freeways because they'll be working at home. These proposals must endure the test of long-standing cynicism to be implemented by local legislatures. But air pollution officials argue there is no longer a choice.
We would have a build-up increasing over a period of years to the point where I think people would flee the area because the air would be so unacceptable.
Longtime residents are hopeful but skeptical. The air here has been naturally dirty for centuries. Dust blown by sea breezes, trapped by the mountains. Is there hope, they wonder, for this place the Indians called the Valley of Smoke? Linda Douglas, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The luxury of instant communication has its price, as news people in New York found out last week.
A man holding hostages demanded on-the-air time, and he got it. Did that episode set a dangerous precedent? We'll talk about it with some reporters involved next on Night Watch.
Today's weather, the coldest temperatures will be in the northern Rockies, where readings will only be near or slightly above the 40-degree mark. Mild air will push into the Great Plains, where temperatures will climb into the 70s and 80s. Around the nation, Atlanta will be cloudy with a high of 67, St. Louis partly cloudy and 76, Denver partly cloudy and 74, and San Francisco sunny and 71. This portion of Night Watch is sponsored by the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, all the business news you need.
If you have to wait a week for business news, maybe it's not news anymore. The Wall Street Journal gives you today's business news today, so you can use it today.
Get all the business news you need when you need it. Get the Wall Street Journal. Delivered every business day for 6 months for $47, just 37 cents a day. Phone toll-free 800-228-6260. That's 6 months, $47, only 37 cents a day. Phone 800-228-6260 now.
In the world of contemporary sculpture, only a classic endures. Presenting the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. Currently the most popular mid-size car in America. And as you can plainly see, for 1983, the artistry continues. Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. Oldsmobile! Have one built for you.
Murphy usually eats the first serving from a can, but seldom the second.
If I had a nickel for every can Hector didn't finish...
If your cat prefers fresh food to leftovers, tear into Tender Vittles brand cat food.
Fresh.
And watch him tear in. Cats love Tender Vittles. It's fresh every time. Each meal sealed to stay moist and delicious.
No? Maybe I should have frozen it.
Tear into Tender Vittles at every meal.
Fresh.
And watch your cat tear in.
Mr. McEnroe, that's a very close shave.
You must be joking! That ball was in!
No, Mr. McEnroe, you're shaved. It's very close.
Of course! I shave with Bic.
You earn millions and shave with a 20-cent Bic?
Look, why pay more for fancy handles and tricky tops when I get lots of close shaves with Bic?
Advantage McEnroe.
He's right. I don't have to shave with a 20-cent Bic. But I do.
Newspapers, radio, and television entertain and inform, but sometimes they play a more active role. One unsettling example occurred last week in New York City. An escaped criminal, Larry Van Dyke, took 6 hostages in a Brooklyn hospital. He demanded the media play a major role in negotiations. They grabbed the chance. Hostages were pushed before eager television cameras. A newspaper reporter became the principal bargainer for police. There was closed-circuit television linking Van Dyke's basement stronghold with the police command center. He demanded special radio reports over a local station, and he got them. As time wore on, 3 hostages were released, and Van Dyke laid down more demands. That, too, was a media event. Van Dyke wanted assurances he would not be returned to a state prison where he feared a reputation as an informer would get him killed. Corrections officials took center stage as Van Dyke got jumpier and negotiations became more tense. Finally, after 47 hours, the last hostage was released and Van Dyke had his final say on television before returning to prison. Now, did the media help end that hostage standoff peacefully, or did the extraordinary coverage, often live, help to prolong it? With us today is Bella English, a reporter for the New York Daily News, who did much of the negotiating with Larry Van Dyke in that situation. Bella, how did you first get the word that you were wanted in this case? How did the call come to you, and what did you think when you got it?
Well, I was on another assignment. I had started making a call that morning on this situation. I got some just very basic information, the name, who he was, where he was, why he was doing it, basically. I gave it to the city desk, and I said, I'm going on this special project I'm working on. I'll be gone the rest of the day. Gave him the address where I'd be, fortunately. And about an hour and a half after I left, I got a call that my city desk wanted me. They said, all they said was very cryptic. They said, you're wanted in the hostage negotiations. He wants to talk to you. I said, who? And they said, this guy. I said, why? They said, we don't know. Police car will be waiting downstairs to take you to the helicopter.
Did you make any connection with him? I mean, had you had any contact before?
Oh, yes, we had contact before, but I didn't remember him. I don't even know if he told me his name the first time he called me. It wasn't until I got to the hospital and when the policeman was escorting me down the hall and said, He says he knows you. He says he's talked to you over the phone before from Rikers Island. And then I stopped in my tracks. I said, oh, it must be this guy who called me a couple times last spring and summer. He wanted me to check out a story that was about 4 years old and was in Attica, so it wasn't really our circulation and it was an old story. So I sort of politely told him that. And he called me back once or twice more, as I recall.
Well, now, what did you think about being thrust into the middle of this thing? It was almost as if they didn't even ask you. They sort of told you you were going to do this. You're a reporter. You're used to covering stories, but all of a sudden you're in the middle of this life and death situation.
Well, I was really uncomfortable when the call first came over. All the way over there, I thought, this must be a reaction to one of my stories. I was beginning to feel very guilty. What if he makes impossible demands and results and people are killed? And I also had the ambivalence about becoming a part of a story and not covering it, but being covered. And but once I got in there and the police explained to me the seriousness of the situation, they had held off for a couple hours before they called me until they thought it was absolutely necessary. Then I didn't even think about it for 2 whole days.
It was a real long haul for you to do that, and I presume that you were exhausted and you were scared and all of those usual things, but did you feel that you were a hostage yourself, that you were trapped in this situation?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I wrote that in my story today.
Oh.
Everybody there was a hostage. The relatives, of course the hostages themselves, the scores and scores of police, the press who were covering it, and the handful of other principal players.
Just before we take a break here, Bella, tell us, how can you report as a reporter and be a negotiator? How can you remain neutral and meet your objective standards of reportage?
That's a constant problem. Fortunately, I wasn't covering the news story as such. We had 2 other reporters out there and some rewrite men on the other side. What I did was write first-person accounts of my negotiations with him.
So you were covered in the hard news sense.
Right. I had nothing to do with it. I would get them some
Let's take a brief break here, and then we're going to come back and do some more. Nightwatch will be right back with Bella English, New York Daily News reporter who played a part in a recent hostage-holding situation. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
Hello there, I'm Carvel's Dumpy the Pumpkin, and I'm here with my friend Nutty the Ghost to introduce a new Carvel ice cream cake for Halloween, Wiki the Witch.
That's right, Dumpy. Our all-made fresh deli at your participating Carvel ice cream store.
And hey, you can send one to a friend by calling this toll-free number, and we honor most major credit cards. And we'd like to thank you for patronizing Carvel. Thanks, folks.
Crazy Eddie's going computer crazy with the lowest prices anywhere on the Commodore VIC-20 personal computer. The Commodore VIC-20 is the friendly computer that's simple to learn and use. The VIC-20 can help make your life easier with a tremendous selection of pre-recorded programs for home, business, education, and fun. Plus incredible games like Vic Avenger, Midnight Driver, and Jupiter Lander. Shop around, get the best prices you can find on the Commodore VIC-20 personal computer. Then go to Crazy Eddie and he'll beat him. Now's the time to get a Commodore personal computer. Crazy Eddie, his computer prices are insane.
What state cut its taxes more than any other state?
California.
Wrong. What state cut the maximum personal income tax rate by 1/3?
Pennsylvania.
Wrong. What state cut $6 billion in business and personal taxes the last 4 years?
North Carolina.
Wrong. In what state is all this tax-cutting history being made?
New York.
Right. The biggest state tax cuts of any state were
made in New York.
How come you guys didn't know that?
A lot of people think I never smile. Well, I have a serious interest in the news I report. I think it's important to try to uncover the little facts that are not always apparent. Quite often, those little facts give you a better understanding of a story and how it affects you. That's important, too, because you've shown that you have a serious interest in the news. That's Channel 2 News. If it concerns you, it concerns us. Besides, I do smile. See?
There's a little monster in every one of us that can destroy a forest as long as we treat fire like a toy. Please.
We're back discussing the role of media in hostage-holding situations, such as Bella English, a reporter for the New York Daily News, got involved in last week in New York City. And joining us now is Frank Bowles, the man who started the New York City Police Department hostage negotiating unit about 10 years ago, and for many years was its chief negotiator. And Chris Borgen, a longtime friend of mine and a reporter at WCBS TV in New York City, who has himself been involved in a lot of hostage situations. Frank, you're the guy who started all this, and you've watched the fact that the media is getting involved in it grow in both numbers and importance over the years. What do you think of that situation? Is that good, or is that in fact perpetuating this kind of thing?
Well, we've always had the media involved with it, in that when we started the program, we brought the media in to see what we were doing, because they are an integral part of it. But we don't want the media to actually become a participant in the particular operation. That can be very, very difficult.
But they do, in fact.
In some instances, we have even requested people from the media, if individual people have a certain amount of credibility on an individual job. Each job is a little bit different. We have guidelines that generally direct us in the way we're going, but every job is a little different. But as a general rule, we have to be very cautious that the media does not become a participant, because someone will play for that media coverage, and in fact, the media becomes a hostage to the person who's holding the others.
Now, Chris, how many of these things have you been involved in?
12.
12? A dozen?
Yes.
A dozen times the police have called you and said, we'd like you, in effect they say, we'd like you to put your life on the line for us to walk into this situation where a man is holding a weapon on people. How do you feel about that as an individual? Is that fair to you?
Well, two things. It usually doesn't work that way. Usually it is the person who requests that you come and act as the mediator.
Right.
And what my feelings, trepidations. I don't know if I'm qualified to be the individual who, by his position in that negotiations, will contribute to the loss of life or the savings of a life. I really don't feel that I'm qualified to do that. Nevertheless, you have that human problem. A person is holding other people hostage. Their lives are on the line. You have to make that gut decision. Hey, that could be my wife, that could be my child, that could be my mother or my father. I would love to believe, if it were me in there being a hostage, that someone would come in and try to negotiate my life, my freedom.
Frank, do you think that it's a bad precedent to allow people who take hostages and make demands to have instant access to the media if they wish?
I think the instantaneous access is a little bit touchy, because you do get a certain amount of imitation in situations.
Copycats.
For example,
yeah.
Right. For example, terrorists especially would give a manifesto. Now you sort of wonder, would the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS put something out for a terrorist organization? And then if you do that, again, you have that possibility of another person trying the same thing. Again, though, I must say each job is different. I think Bella did a fantastic job, and in order to give credibility to the negotiators, many times the people in there feel that they're going to be blown away. They think they're going to be killed.
We've got a lot more to talk about, and we want to ask you some more questions too, Bella. So Nightwatch will be right back with our guest this evening. We're talking about the role of the media in hostage-holding situations. Please don't go away.
You washed Fluffy.
So?
The tub's clogged. What'll unclog all that hair?
George, stop barking. Use liquid Drano with Formula Oxide 3.
Drano's strong, but that's unclogged.
No needing liquid works better. Drano's got the power to bust that clog.
All clear.
Great. Now for dinner.
After I feed Fluffy.
It's a dog's life, George. Try liquid Drano. No leading liquid works better.
If you have to wait a week for business news, maybe it's not news anymore. The Wall Street Journal gives you today's business news today, so you can use it today.
Get all the business news you need when you need it. Get the Wall Street Journal. Delivered every business day for 6 months for $47, just 37 cents a day. Phone toll-free 800-228-6260. That's 6 months, $47, only 37 cents a day. Phone 800-228-6260 now.
Business is so quiet. You could read the books here.
That book by the phone can help. The Bell System Yellow Pages.
Free parking, free delivery.
That's Fred. Fred's Furniture next door. Oh, he does a great business.
Where beautiful hair is a tradition.
That's Miss Claire. Oh, is she busy?
Sure. The Bell System Yellow Pages talks to people when they let their fingers do the walking and are ready to talk business.
I'm ready.
Get the Yellow Pages talking.
We were big on books.
Let your fingers do the walking.
Another scorcher today. We could hit 100.
Give me strength.
You've got it.
Harold, our dinner guests will be here in 20 minutes.
Give me strength.
You've got it. Shield's a deodorant soap that gives you extra strength. And now Shield is improved with richer, thicker lather. You're gonna feel fresher and cleaner than ever.
Here comes Charlie. Ooh, hit the shower. She's dying to meet you. Give me strength.
You got it. Extra strength Shield with new, richer lather.
Back now talking about the role of the media in situations in which hostages demand their participation as negotiators. And Bella English of the New York Daily News, the situation that you were in last week was pretty scary, but I'm wondering basically how did you feel about the ethical conflict, the requirement that you be a professional reporter, that you be neutral, that you observe, and the fact that you were called upon to do a different kind of job there. Isn't that a conflict of interest for you?
Well, it definitely is. And I worried about it a lot on the way in there. Once I got in that room and I picked up the phone and began talking to a man who had a loaded gun and 5 people and behind closed doors, my journalistic role sort of took a second seat, a back seat, and I really just became not a negotiator exactly.
But you wrote a lot of stories, a lot of columns about it. Did that affect your writing? I mean, did it color it to the extent where you thought you were no longer a good reporter, perhaps?
I don't really think so. I wasn't doing the hard news coverage. The stories I wrote were, as I said, first-person accounts, and they were a bit more subjective, but I think they were played that way. I mean, people knew I wasn't covering the factual play-by-play part of it as much as I was giving a more sort of impressionistic stroke.
Well, let me ask Chris the same thing. You've been in a dozen of these things. What have been your thoughts? Have they evolved any about this conflict of interest question as you've done more and more of them, and how?
Once you step into that situation, you cannot be a reporter. Not for the hard news, as Bella just said. That is left for someone else to write. The only thing I can write is a first-person subjective review of what happened, of which I participated. And as of that moment, you're no longer so much a reporter as you are a reviewer of a given group of situations, a group of runs that you were involved in.
Did you have any is it harder for you to make that jump from being the factual reporter to the participant and therefore the color observer, so to speak, of
It's difficult because when you come to the scene, you want to be the reporter. And once you become involved, you know that you cannot be the reporter because you no longer can be completely objective, honestly fair with the overall view, because you're dealing with the person on a very subjective level. There's an identity there and a crisis because of that identity. Right. And as a result, write the sidebar story, but you can't write the hard news.
We're going to take another short break, and we'll be back with our 3 guests discussing the role of the media in hostage-holding situations when Night Watch continues straight ahead. Stay with us, please.
In the next half hour, President Reagan's new war on drugs. They're throwing more men and money into the fray, but some law enforcers say we'll never be able to crack the illegal drug trade. Associate Attorney General Rudolph Giuliani estimates the odds and picks the targets in the next 30 minutes.
Our Night Watch subject this evening is the role of media in hostage-holding situations, and Frank Boltz, as the former chief negotiator for the NYPD hostage negotiating team, what do you think qualifies a media person, a reporter, to become a negotiator in these situations?
Well, I think they deal with people constantly, and I think that's what a negotiator is, a person who can stimulate the hostage taker into talking, and reporters are interviewers, and that's what a negotiator is. He's trying to get that person who's pent up with anxiety to ventilate that anxiety. But a second dual role is the reporter is a credible person who's a neutral person who the hostage taker feels will protect him when he's coming out, because no matter what the police say to him, many times they feel they're going to see, what's going to happen is what they see on television. When they come out, they're going to be blown away by the cops, and it's not so, especially here in New York. When we work with them, we actually paint a word picture as to what they will see when they come out. Sure, we have cops there with rifles, machine guns, and shotguns, but the emergency service people are all disciplined people, and they will not fire, even if fired upon.
Chris, I remember a situation where you were in a bank, hostage holding 49 people,
49 people
coming out of the bank like this, with your hands up. Was that to guard against, were you actually shielding them?
Yes. Their fear was that police armada outside, and the fact that they had to look out of those windows and see this armada of guns facing them in that bank window, even as one of their cohorts, Mace Brown, one of the 10 most wanted men, was dead on the sidewalk in front of them. His brains spilt out on the sidewalk. They thought that was to be their fate. And for 4.5 hours, the object was to convince them that it was not going to be their fate. And then finally, to say, I tell you what, I will stand in front of you and come out with the flag up. If anyone fires, I'm to be the first hit. Just put your guns in my pocket.
Let me ask you, every time you get into one of these things, do you worry about this? Oh, Lord, this is something I can't deal with. I'm going to talk myself into my grave, trying to do this. I'm not a qualified...
Yes, yes, always. Tremendous responsibility.
What makes you do
just
it?
say, because there is that feeling that life is sacrosanct. There's nothing more important than life. And if you can be, as of that moment, a tool to save a life, by the love of God, you've got to do it. There's nothing else you can do. You have to.
What's the bottom line, Frank?
As Chris indicated, life is the most important thing. Criminals can be recaptured, property can be recovered, money can be reprinted if necessary, but no one can bring back a life. We've even had with, for example, the emergency service at the John and Al sporting goods store. One of their own men was killed by the perpetrators in that gun shop. And yet, even though these people inside fired about 140 rounds out, the emergency service people maintained firearms discipline and did not shoot.
Are the police resentful at all of the fact that these hostage holders call for the reporters and they want them to come in? Do you think you're getting undercut in your jobs?
Every once in a while, it's you know, they always feel, well, gee, we're trying to do a good job, and yet we recognize, we've been trained to recognize that that is their problem. We send in, usually we will send in the credentials of the reporter who's outside and let them know that that reporter will be outside to witness their coming out, and many times we'll meet them halfway, and we take our chances sometimes after we evaluate everything. Bob Loudon and the team over in Brooklyn did a fantastic job, as did the other team in the Bronx a little bit later on.
All right. Well, listen, we're just about out of time. I'm sorry. We could talk, I think, for hours about this subject, but thank you all for being here. We have Bella English of the New York Daily News and Chris Borgen of WCBS TV in New York. Chris, the veteran of these situations. Bella has just been through her first one last week. And Frank Bowles, the man who started the New York City Police Department hostage negotiating team. Our guests on Night Watch this evening, a very interesting topic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
From CBS News, this is Night Watch with Harold Dow, Karen Stone, Christopher Glenn, and Felicia Jeter.
And a very hearty good morning to you all. I'm Harold Dow. The chase is on. President Reagan's declared a new war on drugs.
But can we ever catch up to the drug kingpins? We'll talk about the new plan of attack with Associate Attorney General Rudolph Giuliani.
Baseball's Redbirds are not exactly in the catbird seat today. Oh, there you are over there. Baseball's Redbirds are not exactly in the catbird seat today. We're going to have more World Series highlights for you this morning on Night Watch. But first, here's Chris with the news, and he's over there.
Where?
There.
For the first time, the Social Security system is going to borrow money to meet its monthly payments to the elderly. In this morning's editions, the New York Times says the Old Age Trust Fund will borrow between $1 and $2 billion from the Social Security's disability or health insurance funds. That money is needed to cover the November payments. A branch agency of the United Nations votes today on a resolution to expel Israel from the world body. The International Telecommunications Union, now meeting in Nairobi, takes up the Algerian-sponsored move, and the final tally is expected to be close. The U.S. is threatening to walk out of the session if Israel is ordered out. Lebanese President Amin Gemayel goes before the United Nations General Assembly today to plead for help in rebuilding his war-ravaged nation. The Lebanese leader arrived in New York on Sunday, and Andrea Naverson filed this report.
It was only the first stop on a three-nation tour, but for Lebanese President Amin Gemayel, it could be the most crucial. Gemayel told reporters he needs U.S. political and economic support to bind his country's wounds and rebuild.
I will be emphasizing in front of the United Nations and with the American administration the urgency of the withdrawal of all foreign forces from Lebanon and the need for a comprehensive program of reconstruction.
Later at a reception, Lebanese Americans shouted their support for Gemayel, who in turn pledged to rebuild his battered country after 8 years of civil war.
Very soon, and you will return to your country to participate, and we will participate all together to build this new country, this new Lebanon, for which 5,000 of our beautiful Lebanese are died.
Later today, Gemayel will address the UN General Assembly. On Tuesday, he'll meet with President Reagan, who's promised additional economic aid. Andrea Naverson, CBS News, New York.
With the congressional elections only 2 weeks away, President Reagan will have politicking on his mind today. After a quiet weekend at Camp David, the president campaigns by closed-circuit television again, beaming his message to 20 Republican gatherings in 15 states. Later this week, Mr. Reagan plans to stump in person with campaign appearances scheduled in Illinois and Nebraska. Is all this electioneering just practice for a 1984 re-election bid by Mr. Reagan? His White House counselor, Edwin Meese, commented on that possibility on Sunday.
Larry Speaks, the deputy press secretary, said very pointedly during the week that he thought President Reagan would run for re-election. Do you feel the same way?
My personal belief is that he probably will. He hasn't made up his own mind yet. He won't until sometime, I would say, probably late next year. But I have, if I had to bet right now, I'd certainly bet that he would run again.
Organized labor jumps into the political fray on Tuesday. That's when the AFL-CIO kicks off its Get Out the Vote crusade. The idea is to urge union members to go to the polls November 2nd and to vote against pro-Reagan congressional candidates. Well, it isn't a garden paradise, but it is home, and Eve is glad to be back there this morning. Eve is a chimpanzee, you see, and her home is a cage at Chicago's Lincoln Park Zoo. She was abducted from her cage a week ago by 3 men who planned to sell Eve for drug money. But the plot was foiled, and Eve was recovered by week's end, slightly dehydrated, but otherwise in good condition. The chimp nappers have been apprehended. Good.
Okay, this is a related story. If there's one business that is thriving in today's economy, it's the drug business, the illegal kind. And President Reagan is unleashing an ambitious program to close down shop. Just ahead, Associate Attorney General Rudolph Giuliani describes how he plans to do it.
7 months, the South Florida task force has been quite successful in stemming the flow of drugs.
Today's weather, much of the east will have sunny skies as chilly weather continues across the northeast. A storm in the northern plains will spread rain and snow in the northern Rockies and showers in parts of Minnesota. Around the nation, New York will be sunny with a high of 62. Dallas sunny and 86. Minneapolis cloudy and 65. And Los Angeles partly cloudy and 69.
Beef is high in fat. Pork is high in fat. But we tested our Cookin' Good chickens, and they've got less than 6 grams a serving. And while we're low in fat, we get high marks for taste because our birds feast on corn, soybean meal, and pure well water. Cooking good. We have but one lofty goal, to be the world's best chicken.
If you were blind, I would be just a shadow on a stage. But many blind people see again after corneal transplant operations. I'm Angela Lansbury, and this chance for sight requires the cornea from a human eye. And to obtain these corneas, we need individuals who will pledge their eyes after death to the eye bank. Become an eye donor, call the eye bank, or pledge on your driver's license and see how good it feels.
Oh, Edna, the Toyota needs struts, brakes, and a new muffler. And if we can't get the car back by tonight, we can't go to your mother's for dinner. She'll never get all that done in one day.
If you want your foreign car fixed fast, trust the Midas Touch. Midas has foreign car struts, brakes, and mufflers in stock.
I won't see my mother-in-law for a week.
Trust the Midas Touch.
Hi, Mom.
You'll be barking up the right tree for canine comedy when Ralph grabs the leash on The Muppet Show. Monday, it's a doggone case of Muppet madness when Ralph flips for Petula Clark. Tuesday, you'll hear applause from the paws of Ralph for comedian George Burns. Wednesday, puppy love makes the Muppet Pooch want to steal a smooch from Phyllis George. And Thursday, Ralph tickles the ivories with his idol Victor Borga. Don't miss these dog days on The Muppet Show, beginning Monday at 7:30 on Channel 2.
America's drug problem. It's not old news. It's an old crisis that's getting worse. Now, 2 weeks before Election Day, President Reagan comes forth with a new war on drugs. Will it help, or is it politics as usual? For the answers, we have as our guest this morning, Rudolph Giuliani, Associate Attorney General with the Justice Department. He's going to tell us what this war is all about. Good morning and welcome to Nightwatch.
Good morning.
A lot of people are concerned. Did I mispronounce your name?
Giuliani.
I was hoping that's what I said. I have it written out phonetically here, Giuliani. I don't want to call you Giulini like the conductor in L.A. A lot of people are saying that this war on drugs that the president has been talking about now is just something that's political, that you know, the problem is not new, so why is the solution?
Well, I don't know really what that means political. It isn't political in the sense of bipartisan. This is a program that's supported by Republicans, Democrats. It's something that's really developed over a long period of time.
In other words, it's 2 weeks before elections. This will make possibly the Republicans, by way of making the president look better.
Actually, this is the result of the task force that we've had in South Florida for now about 6 or 7 months, the South Florida Task Force, that has been quite successful in stemming the flow of drugs into that area. And what we're hoping to do is to mount an effort like that in 12 other regions throughout the United States, using a lot of the things we learned in South Florida elsewhere.
How successful is successful?
Well, you know, this is the problem of crime, and you're not going to wipe it out, you're not going to end it, you'd have to change human nature to end it. Successful means being able to exert greater control over the drugs coming into this country and over the criminal activity of those people who are involved in it.
But can you measure the success that you've had so far?
You can measure it in the price of drugs, what's happening to that, to the availability of it, the number of arrests that you make, the amount of drugs that you seize. You cut into the problem. You can't stop completely the flow of drugs into this country, but by dealing with source countries, trying to get them to eradicate the crop, by offering them incentives to do so, which we do, by beefing up your border patrol, and then by working on these organized criminal enterprises that deal in drugs in the interior, you can cut the problem back pretty substantially.
What are the countries that we're really talking about when we talk about drugs?
Well, it depends on the drug. If you're talking about cocaine and marijuana, you're principally talking about South American countries, Colombia being the principal one. If you're talking about heroin, then you're talking about Southeast Asia, the Golden Triangle, and then the transshipment countries, West Germany, Italy, France.
So how are you going to deal with the politics involved with that? That has been a big problem. Everybody says you're throwing money at the problem on this end. Why don't you nip it in the bud?
Well, we offer a good deal of foreign aid conditioned on countries participating with us in the drug problem. Unfortunately, some of those countries are communist-controlled countries. In Vietnam and in that area of the world, a good deal of the poppy crop is grown from which heroin comes. And we don't have diplomatic relations with them.
And so you don't expect a great deal of cooperation.
That's right.
So how are you going to handle that if this is going to really be successful?
In that situation, we have to rely upon trying to stop the drugs in the countries to which they're transshipped. In some cases, Italy, in some cases, West Germany. We've gotten a good deal more cooperation from both those governments in the last couple of years because, strangely, they're developing a heroin problem of their own. And they're beginning to understand our problems much better than they did before.
So we're getting more support.
We're getting more support internationally than we ever have before on the drug problem because other countries are starting to feel those problems domestically, and therefore they're beginning to understand ours.
You seem to be real optimistic about this new money and this new program. We're talking maybe $200 million. Is that really enough to be serious about this?
Yes, it is, and you have to see that relative to where we stand. That permits us an over 10% increase in the overall size of the FBI and the DEA. It permits us about a 25 to 30% increase in the number of federal agents that we have available to do drug work. That's a big infusion of manpower very quickly, 25 to 30% increase in the number of federal agents that we will have available to do drug work.
A lot of those agents are going to be brand new. What can we expect from baby agents?
Well, we're going to have to phase them in. We will use experienced agents in these task forces that will be set up in 12 places all over the country. They'll have a minimum of 100 agents in each one of the task forces, and we'll take experienced agents and put them in the task force and then backfill. In other words, they'll be taken off other assignments, and we will hire younger agents and train them and then work them into drug work. We're not going to throw in...
We'll be back to talk about some more about this drug problem and President Reagan's war on it when we come back to Night Watch.
According to New York law enforcement officials, illegal drug trade in the United States totals $90 billion a year.
Mommy, Daddy's here!
When the Ross's TV set was stolen, it was 5 years old, but Aetna didn't quibble. Aetna replaced it with a brand new model.
Aetna, I'm glad I met you.
When the Gilberts' house was destroyed by fire, Aetna settled in full within 3 days, so they were able to rebuild right away.
Aetna, I'm glad I met you.
If this is the kind of complete coverage you want, maybe it's time you met Aetna.
Aetna, I wish I'd met you.
It's new. It's natural.
It's chocolate chip.
New chocolate chip granola clusters. Granola's answer to chocolate candy.
Sweet and natural.
Nature Valley takes chewy nougat, creamy caramel, toasty granola, and adds rich chocolate chips.
Sweet and natural.
No additives, no preservatives. It's chewy.
It's chocolate.
New chocolate chip granola clusters.
Sweet and natural.
100% natural. The Nature Valley way.
There's a lot about the business world you can't learn in any textbook. You learn it here, the Wall Street Journal. Today's business, always current, always timely. Believe me, it's required reading.
Get all the business news you need when you need it. Get the Wall Street Journal. Delivered every business day for 6 months for $47. Just 37 cents a day. Phone toll-free 800-228-6260. That's 6 months, $47, only 37 cents a day. Phone 800-228-6260 now.
Are you a saltaholic? Do you think most everything needs salt? Then you're a saltaholic. Like most Americans, you eat more than 20 times the salt your body needs. Now, with no salt, you can have the flavor of salt without salt. No salt tastes good, and there's no salt in no salt. You can shake no salt, cook with no salt, and shake the salt habit.
President Reagan has launched a new war on drugs 2 weeks before Election Day. This new offensive has raised many questions, needless to say, some legal, some moral, some political. To help offer us some answers, we return to our guest, Associate Attorney General Robert Giuliani. I did your name properly that time, I'm certain, because I was
Rudolph.
thinking about, oh no, give me a break. We're going to change your name to Joe Brown. But I want to know some more about your problem vis-a-vis like the users. You're saying you're getting more success now from where the drugs are coming from, cooperation with other governments. What about the fact that there's a market for this? What do you do about that? If people want it, how are you ever really going to stop the flow?
Well, there is a market for it, but there's a decreasing market for it. Over the last year and a half, since so far as young people are concerned, there has been less use of marijuana from recent studies that I've seen, less use of cocaine. There's been a slight increase in the amount of heroin use, although that had decreased for a while. I don't think we're in the situation where we were 5, 6 years ago when there was just this increasing use of drugs. I think that there's been a lot done in the educational area. There's been a lot done in the treatment area that helps at least at that end of the problem. And obviously there's more we can do, but that's part of the whole offensive as well.
You have some problems, some potential problems just by the nature of bureaucracy. You have all these different federal agencies trying to solve the same problem. You have just innate rivalries between them because they're human beings involved. And now we're being told that you're taking money from somewhere else in government and putting it on this problem at a time when we're told that the fat has been removed. Where is this money coming from if the fat has been removed?
Well, it will come from other agencies of government outside of law enforcement. After all, the enforcement of the law is one of the prime purposes of government, and it really has to be a priority.
Well, every department says that. You know, if you take it from the health department, if you take it from, you know, food, wherever you take it from, that department is going to say, this has got to be a national priority. We can't function without it. Well, you know, I know that you're happy that you're getting the money, but what about the people who are losing it, the departments that are losing it?
Well, there's no doubt that those arguments can be made for almost any function of government. But if you go back to the core of government, why it was established to protect people from predators from within and invaders from without. I mean, that's the whole purpose of government, is to give people protection from crime. And this is probably the most important contribution the federal government can make, is to deal with the drug problem, to deal with the drug pushers and the drug dealers, to try to apprehend them. We can't apprehend all of them, and then to put them in jail and in prisons for long periods of time.
Now, you say you don't think this was political, since Democrats and Republicans are interested in solving the problem, but the president has been talking about solving this problem for a long time. If it was an old priority, why wasn't it in the budget?
Well, this is something that developed over a period of time. We've done things like bring the FBI into drug enforcement for the first time. We did that 9 months ago to try to solve some of the problems you mentioned before of competition between federal agencies. We've established law enforcement coordinating committees in 94 districts all throughout the United States to bring together state and local law enforcement. We established a South Florida task force. That was very successful, but it diverted a lot of drug shipments into other areas of the United States. These 12 task forces that will be a big infusion of new manpower were the natural development of all of that. It was the lessons we learned in those other areas that showed us the way to do it. And this is not just a half-baked plan to use up manpower. This is a very specific, very focused kind of activity to deal with.
And you think the job can be done?
I'm absolutely certain it can be done. I've seen it done before, and I think South Florida is a good example of how it can be done.
Rudolph Giuliani, thank you so much for being with us here on Nightwatch this morning.
Thank you for having me.
In sports, St. Louis out-hit the Milwaukee Brewers 15-11 in Game 5 of the series, but the Brewers got them when they counted. They got the defense when it counted, too. More to come in sports in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
I report news like the overcrowding of our prisons and how plant closings have taken thousands from the assembly line to the unemployment line. But I also make time to cover other kinds of stories, like my reports on Thursday's Child, about kids who, because of their age, medical problems, or some other reason, have a hard time getting adopted. So many of you care that those kids are now being helped. That's another kind of news we look for at Channel 2, because if it concerns you, it concerns us.
Marrakesh, Casablanca, Fez, Tangier, Rabat, Agadir, Morocco. You can do so much more. See so much more. Play more. Enjoy more. Yes, there's more to Morocco. More than you ever dreamed. Morocco. Contact your travel agent or the Morocco Tourist Office.
If you want danger, if you want excitement, if you want hot-blooded, fast-moving action, then you want Barnaby Jones. No lie, Jones. He's quick, he's daring, he's outsmarted the best, and he's still going strong. Buddy Ebsen stars as Barnaby Jones, the private eye who really packs a punch.
Put it down, son. I rarely miss at this distance.
You want Barnaby Jones, and we've got him. Weekdays at 4 on Channel 2.
You son of a gun.
Alan, I've just been going over your file. When you walked in here and said, I want to be a salesman, I wouldn't have bet a nickel on your chances. Sales takes hard work, tenacity, and guts. And frankly, I didn't think you had it. But I was wrong. Because now here you are, our newest district manager.
All I ever needed was a chance.
Everybody deserves a chance to make it on their own, and there are things you can do to help. Write National Urban League.
You got to hand it to the Milwaukee Brewers. They were out-hit by St. Louis, 15-11, but their hits turned into runs. Third inning, Cecil Cooper's grounder made it 2-1 Brewers, even though Keith Hernandez made a Gold Glove stop on the ball. And in the seventh, Robin Yount hit one into the right field seats to make it 4-2 Milwaukee. Yount went 4-4 in that game. Again, second time he's done that. 6-4 the Brewers, the final score. The Brewers lead the series 3-2. Game 6 Tuesday night in St. Louis. The NFL All-Star Game was played at RFK Stadium in Washington in front of just 8,700 people on Sunday. AFC quarterback Don Strock found Baltimore's Ray Butler for a 61-yard touchdown pass to wake up the crowd, but the NFC won it 23-22. There was more enthusiasm shown at a California high school where the Oak Park, California Eagles and the Carpinteria Warriors played. It was at that game where Eric Affolter kicked a 64-yard field goal. Well, CBS News called out there, and Eric's brother said, yes, there was some black and white footage of the kick, so he got on his bicycle and rode over to get it by special messenger. That's Eric's brother's bicycle. CBS News correspondent Charles Osgood completes this story.
As it happens, Eric's team lost the game, but even so, he will always remember that 64-yard field goal that he made when he was only 16.
64-yard field goal. I don't think that's ever been done anywhere in organized football before. Lots of tennis to talk about. In Naples, Italy, Ivan Lendl beat Wojciech Fibak in the straight sets to win the $250,000 fall finals WCT tournament. The set scores were 6-4, 6-2, and 6-1. Chris Evert-Lloyd beat Andrea Jaeger 3-6, 6-1, 6-4 to win a $125,000 ladies event in Palm Harbor, Florida. This was Evert-Lloyd's 27th consecutive match victory since losing the Wimbledon finals 3 months ago. Yannick Noah defeated Mats Wilander of Sweden 6-4, 6-2, 6-3 to win the $100,000 men's championship in Swiss tennis action.
And firefighters are still battling a brush fire raging across 750 acres in central California. The blaze threatened the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant on Sunday, but winds carried the fire away from the inactive atomic facility. Greece's ruling Pan-Hellenic Socialist Party is not as popular as it had thought. In a nationwide municipal elections on Sunday, the party apparently lost ground to opponents of both the left and the right. The elections were the first tests of public opinion since the socialists took power last year.
In the next 30 minutes, Nightwatch tells the bittersweet tale of a promising life gone sour. Pat Bayless, from hot prospect to has-been, he says prescribed drugs change his personality permanently. We'll look in our own kitchen for what's becoming a world-renowned cuisine, good old American cooking. That's in the next half hour on Nightwatch.
Election Day is 2 weeks from tomorrow, and for many, the big issue is economics, specifically Reaganomics. That's how it's shaping up in the New York's race for governor. The Democratic candidate is a veteran politician without much money. His Republican opponent, however, is a political rookie who's a rich man. More on the New York governor's campaign from Chris Kelly.
Republican Lou Lehrman is running a multi-million-dollar campaign that began just over a year ago. He is a wealthy, independent businessman and a political rookie.
I represent the politics of the future, a new way of looking at things, a way of redirecting the energies of the American people, but especially here in New York, a way of providing an economic environment where once more we can compete, where we can grow again, where we can take New York to the top, instead of, as I think professional politicians have done, taking it to the bottom.
Nice to see you. You too. Mario Cuomo, the Democrat, has been a professional politician since the mid-1970s. He's completing a 4-year term as lieutenant governor, his only elective office.
I was the first appointee of this administration and the second highest elected official. I've done everything a governor has to know how to do.
Recent polls give Cuomo a slim lead since his upset primary victory over New York City Mayor Ed Koch last month. Lehrman, the unknown, spent $7 million, most of it from his own pocket, on a TV blitz to win nomination. It's estimated Lehrman could spend as much as $10 million before it's all over. That big spending is an issue itself.
Lou Lehrman, for governor.
If I were to win in New York State, probably it would be unprecedented in the modern political history of this nation that anybody as badly outspent as I will be succeeded in a major race. I'm not complaining. If anything, it's the glory of the American system that you're allowed this kind of freedom, that somebody could purchase even an election.
I believe in my ideas. I'm investing some of my own hard-earned capital in the ideas which I believe are important, not only for the future of my city and my state, New York, but ideas that I believe are important for the future of America.
But in this race, Cuomo has made Reaganomics the debatable issue, because Lehrman was once an economic policy advisor to President Reagan.
All of us know that he has made mistakes and that Mario and I will make mistakes. But to base your campaign on a single issue drawn from the polls that Reaganomics may be unpopular with Democrats in New York seems to me to try the patience of the voters.
I'm not attacking President Reagan personally. I'm sure that he's a genial man. I love him. My mother loves him. My family loves him. We just think he's wrong. He's wrong on his economic plan.
To show support for Lehrman and at the same time downplay the Reaganomics issue, White House aide James Baker put in an appearance with the candidate.
So I think it's fair to say that he has some differences with the administration on some of its economic policies. We happen to think our policies are correct, but I do think it's fair to point out that there's some differences.
I'm worried about regression. I'm worried about going back as we've gone back with the president. I'm now worried about the same thing happening with Lehrman, only worse. The term that I use is that Lehrman is Reaganism compounded.
But Lehrman supporters say more of the same would be worse.
Some of the problems that we have encountered may be due to purely the repetition and election of political candidates who have followed the same course over a number of years, and I think it's about time we change direction.
Take the handcuffs off the police and put them on the criminals.
Political observers call the race a classic contest between a liberal and a conservative. Pick an issue, and Cuomo and Lehrman differ on it, like restoring the economy, taxes, public funding of abortions, capital punishment.
You want to do something tough? Life imprisonment without parole. The death penalty is a colossal con job.
I believe, first of all, the death penalty for cold-blooded murder is simple justice.
But can you make sure that you just stop us from getting laid off?
You got to make sure by getting me in and staying after me.
Political moderates traditionally have been successful in New York. Since there aren't any moderates in this race, the choice for voters might be hard, but at least clear-cut. Chris Kelly, CBS News, New York.
And we'll return with more of Night Watch in just a moment.
From CBS News, this is Nightwatch with Chris Glenn.
There can be considerable change.
Dystonia can manifest itself in as mild a form as a rider's cramp. In its most severe form, it contorts the body even worse than in Karen's case, and dystonia has no cure.
We have a long way to go before we even have a fundamental understanding of what dystonia happens to be.
Karen Cook has come to terms with that.
You can function even though you've got this great inconvenience. And you can laugh, you can party, you can have a drink.
You cry sometimes, too?
You cry a lot.
Karen's doctors now report she has shown some slight improvement on new medication, though it's too early to tell just how much progress she'll make. Nightwatch continues with a roundup of the latest news just ahead.